now bring to the podium a man who sat in the U.S. Supreme Court on April 28th, a few weeks ago, as they discussed the legality of same-sex marriage and whether it should be recognized in all 50 states, and of course the territories, including Guam. The main case that day bears his name, Obergefell versus Hodges, as he sought to have the state of Ohio recognize his marriage to another man that was performed in Maryland. I don't know what it's like to have your name be on a Supreme Court case and then likely have your name be in U.S. history books for the next few decades. But we will soon find out. He's a courageous man who calls himself an accidental activist. He's not an attorney and he's not a lifelong activist. He just wanted to legalize the relationship of the love of his life, John Arthur, who was nearing death, and the state of Ohio wouldn't cooperate. This is not primarily, however, a story about legal right, although the discussion has been taken to the U.S. Supreme Court. This is ultimately a love story, an enduring story about two human beings who decided to take a leap of faith into a relationship that was foreclosed to them because they were both males. For many of us, it is hard to understand. For many of us, we wish it would just go away. But for some of us out there in the audience, even today, even if it is only a handful, this is a moment of personal liberation and a public recognition of their humanity. We all know someone who is gay, whether they are leaders, whether they are teachers, whether they are aunts or uncles, whether they are our sons and daughters, and for a growing number there are parents. He has a special relationship to Guam. His father came here as a CB during World War II. We sometimes refer to those servicemen who came to Guam during World War II as liberators. Today, that liberator's son comes back in a different role as representative of a different kind of liberation. In a few weeks, we will know the results of this quest for liberation. But it is my honor, it is our privilege to hear what this 21st century visitor named Obergefell will share with all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, Maneluta Mananahu, let's welcome Jim to the podium.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. It really is an honor to have been asked to be part of this ceremony. Before I start my true commencement speech, I'd like to tell you what a privilege it is for me to be on Guam for the first time. Yesterday, I visited the War in the Pacific National Historical Park, and I had the honor of leaving a wreath in memory of my father. My father was a Navy Seaman, and he was stationed here in Guam during and after World War II. What I've learned during my visit on Guam is that you, as a people, as a culture, honor and respect the sacrifices made by so many. You also value family, and from my perspective, those who fought to liberate this island have become part of your family. Although I'm not Guamanian, I truly feel as if I've been welcomed as part of your family because of that connection. Not only that, Guamanians protect their family. I believe another reason I've been welcomed so warmly is because my story, my fight, is all about protecting family. You relate to that. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing me this great honor. It's also very exciting to finally see a place I only knew through my father. Being here on Guam gives me a chance to remember and reconnect with my dad, and that's truly a gift, especially this Memorial Day weekend. My dad, like many veterans, and I imagine even Chamorro survivors from the war and occupation here on Guam, didn't talk much about his experiences during the war, but I do know a little bit about it. My dad spent a fair amount of time guarding Japanese prisoners, and that experience had an unexpected impact on how my dad viewed the world and other people. I remember my dad saying how surprised he was to discover that those prisoners weren't so very different from him. Guarding them gave him the opportunity to realize that no matter what preconceived notions he might have, people really are more similar than different. I believe that experience, that realization, informed my dad's outlook for the rest of his life. I can't ever remember my dad talking about them versus us, those people, or any of those things that indicated he was making a judgment or thinking of someone as less than or different than he was. I like to think I learned that from him. He was the kind of person who treated others with dignity, something I have come to know that Chamorros did not receive during that occupation. So I'm grateful to my dad and all service members who helped liberate Guam. I was fortunate enough to be able to come out to my dad a few years before he died. His response, "Jim, all I've ever wanted was for you to be happy." I believe his response is rooted in what he discovered about people, even people who seem so different, even enemies at war, while he served here on Guam. I feel it's something that I see embodied in Guam culture as well. There's a deep spirit of welcome and joy for and with others. It's certainly what I have experienced so far during my time on Guam. Okay, now let's talk about commencement. 25 years ago, I was sitting at my commencement ceremony, just like you are today, feeling many of the same things you're likely feeling right now. Happy to be finished with classes, papers, and exams, uncertain about what came next because I still didn't have a real job lined up. Excited about the possibilities that life now held for me. Probably most of all, I was impatient with the commencement speakers because all I wanted was to receive my diploma, go celebrate, and start my life. And go ahead, you can admit, you wish I were done already. One of the things that I do remember most of all is feeling certain that I was going to make a difference in the world. My degree was in secondary education in German, and I just knew I would find a teaching job and be one of those teachers who inspire his students. I was going to be that teacher, that one teacher many students named when asked who made a difference in their lives. I taught high school German for 2 years, and yes, I did make a difference in some of my students' lives, and I've since become friends with several of them. However, being a high school teacher wasn't the best fit for me. Looking back and being honest with myself, I know it's mainly because I wasn't mature enough yet at that point in my life. I still had things to learn about myself, so teaching others wasn't really the best thing for me to be doing. Things don't always turn out the way we expect, and it can take time to find your way, your place in this world. The one certainty I can tell you is this: your path in this world doesn't always take the direction you planned on or expected. Life is a journey, and like any trip, you have to be open to unexpected experiences, side trips, and making the most of what happens. Be open to learning new things about yourself after you leave here. You might feel like you know everything there is to know, but I promise you, there's still more to discover. I know that's been my experience. I left high school teaching and went to graduate school to study college student personnel. I learned even more about myself in graduate school. For one, I learned that I don't like to manage or be responsible for others. And as the director of student activities at a small university, my graduate assistantship, it became clear to me that managing other people just isn't for me. But the most important thing graduate school did for me was provide a safe, welcoming environment for me to accept who I am, a gay man. After years of avoiding that scary internal discussion and wasting so much energy pretending to be someone I wasn't, I could finally admit it not only to myself, but to the people I cared about. For the first time in my life, I was truly open to myself and to others, and within a few short months, my journey took yet another unexpected turn. I fell in love. John and I met once at a bar. Nothing happened. We met again at the same bar. Still nothing happened. We met a third time when one of his housemates invited me to John's house for a New Year's Eve party. I went to that party and I never left. I realized we happened so quickly and easily because I was open to it. I was on my journey and open to possibilities. Finding love wasn't what I expected to happen, but it did. John and I built a life together. We made friends, we bought a home, we traveled, we worked together, we loved each other. I learned even more about myself in 2011 after John and I had been together for 18 years. That spring, John was diagnosed with ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. ALS is a fatal progressive neurological disease, and most patients die within 2 to 5 years of diagnosis. It's also common here in Guam and is known as the tipu. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Think about how you might react if the love of your life were diagnosed with a fatal, incurable disease. Would you do everything in your power to help that person to make the end of his or her life as meaningful, enjoyable, and comfortable as possible? Or would you decide you simply couldn't deal with it and kick that person out and end that relationship? I made what to me was the only possible decision. I did everything in my power to care for John and to make the last few years of his life, our life together, as normal and happy as possible. I realized it wasn't really a decision. The decision implies that I considered more than one possibility. For me, there was no question about how I would respond. John and I had been together for almost 20 years, and although we weren't legally married, we were committed to each other in every other way. I simply did what you do for the person you love. People congratulated me for staying with John and caring for him. They told me how brave I was. I really couldn't understand why anyone would say things like that to me. I just did what was right. I just did what anyone would do for the person they loved. Then John's father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and his father's girlfriend immediately kicked him out and ended their relationship. Oh, now I get it. Not everyone reacts in the same way in situations like this. I learned something more about myself. I always thought of myself as someone who lived up to his commitments, and when the situation called for it, I did. I lived up to my own opinion of myself by honoring my commitments to John. In February 2013, John started hospice care at home. 2 times a week, 2 nurses visited our home to check on John and provide care. John was bedridden because he had lost almost all ability to move the left side of his body and most of the ability to move his right side. He could speak, but only haltingly, a sentence or 2 at a time. He was dependent on others for everything, absolutely everything. Those nurses spent 2 hours each visit for a total of 4 hours each week. I was privileged to care for John the rest of the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't fun. But there was nothing I would rather do than care for my life. What I never imagined at that time, though, was that life would take yet another unexpected turn because I loved someone, because I was willing to take a risk, and because I was open to learning more about myself. On June 26, 2013, the United States Supreme Court released its decision on the Windsor case, ruling that part of the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional. At the moment the ruling was shared in the news, I leaned over to John, hugged and kissed him, and said, "Let's get married." For the first time, marriage could be something more than symbolic for us. It could carry legal weight and be recognized by our government. Of course, it wasn't as easy as taking John 6 blocks in his wheelchair to get a marriage license and then marrying at home where he was safe and comfortable. Ohio passed a constitutional amendment in 2004 that banned same-sex marriage and recognition of same-sex marriages. That meant we needed to go to a different state in order to get a marriage license and to marry. With John's health rapidly deteriorating, our only option was to charter a medical jet. We decided to marry on the grounds of Baltimore Washington International Airport in Maryland. So we did. We finally made our commitment to each other public and legal. After more than 20 years together, we were lucky enough to say I do wed. We felt different, better, more complete. A few days after we married, a civil rights attorney, the friend of a friend, pulled out a blank death certificate and explained that when John died, Ohio would list him as single and leave the surviving spouse field blank on his death certificate. John's last official record as a person would be incorrect. We were devastated. Now here I have to go a little bit off the cuff because the rest of my speech isn't there. So bear with me. So we decided to file suit against the state of Ohio. And on July 19th, 2013, we did just that. We filed suit against the state of Ohio in federal district court. 3 days later, I was in that courtroom as Judge Timothy Black heard our case and our lawyer argued our case in front of him. That same day, July 22nd, 2013, Judge Black returned a ruling in our favor, and he issued a temporary injunction forcing the state of Ohio to recognize our marriage on John's death certificate at the time he died. 3 months to the day later, John passed away, October 22nd, 2013. His death certificate was completed correctly. Our marriage was recognized. He was listed as married, and my name was included on his death certificate as his surviving spouse. A couple months later, in December of 2013, the injunction was made permanent, and at that point, the state of Ohio immediately appealed. We went to the 6th District Court of Appeals. In November of 2014, the 6th District Court of Appeals ruled against us, and 5 other cases from Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Michigan. That ruling set the stage for a Supreme Court challenge. It was the first appeals court to rule against marriage equality. At that point, I could have simply stepped back and said, no, I want to go back to living my quiet life. I don't want to fight this. But I realized it was something I could not do. I made commitments to John over 20 years. I made those commitments public and legal when we married. And my commitment to John meant that I needed to fight. I needed to continue this fight and appeal to the United States Supreme Court. In January of this year, the Supreme Court announced that they would hear our case as well as 5 other cases. And because our case was the first filed after the Windsor ruling, the case became known as Obergefell v. Hodges. And on April 28th, I was in the United States Supreme Court to listen to oral arguments in our case. It was a surreal experience to be in that courtroom and to hear your name and your husband's name and to hear your story argued in front of those 9 justices. The decision comes out in June, and I am very hopeful, but I'm not holding my breath because I know anything can happen. But what I've learned over the time, these past couple of years, is that one person really can make a difference. And love is worth fighting for. And I'm on this journey from the time I was born to this point in time. I have learned every single day. And I think back to my commencement. And I know at that time, I thought, Jim, you're going to go out and make a difference in your students' lives. You're going to have an impact in a classroom. I never imagined I could have an impact beyond a high school classroom. It took me 23 years to find my path, to find my way, to find what I should be doing. And this is it. Fighting for equality, fighting for my husband, fighting for our rights. So, class of spring 2015, as you start your journey, I wish you the best. And keep in mind, you never know what's coming on that path. What you think today, you'll be doing tomorrow, may not happen. Embrace the unexpected. Learn from it, embrace it, and love it, because that is what will turn you into the person you will be. My wish for you, because I think of myself, that 23-year-old sitting in my commencement, I think that 23-year-old version of myself would be surprised by what I've been able to do. I think that 23-year-old version of me would be proud of the man I've become. And that's my wish for all of you, that your younger self will be proud of the person, the man or the woman that you become in the future. Embrace your journey. When those unexpected turns come up, take them, embrace them, love them, and learn from them. Thank you very much.